This is the Believe in Texans podcast alongside six-year NFL veteran and former Houston Texans wide receiver Cecil Shorts III. I am Patrick Creighton, host of Area 45 on Sports Radio 610, your home of the Houston Texans. And Cecil, today's a day. Today is the day. Training camp opens today. It's here. It's finally here. Football begins now. We actually get to see real football, like actual players on fields, actual practices, real coaches. They're all here. It's not just, well, they're allowed to show up if they want, or, hey, we're going to put helmets on and we're going to wear shorts and we're just kind of going to hang out. No. I mean, they're not granted. They're still in helmets and shorts, but it's officially official.
Yeah.
Training camp opens today for your Houston Texans. And, for all the expectations, I would tell you, I think that there is more excitement and there are more expectations around this iteration of the Houston Texans than there has ever been for any iteration of the Houston Texans. I think this is the first time fans feel like they could legitimately go to a Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
They're not the favorites, but it's legitimately plausible. It's not winging a prayer. They could legit go to a Super Bowl. And, for a team that has as many young stars as they do, they also have a handful of, let's say, mostly younger players that I think this is a very, very pivotal camp for them in their careers.
Mm.
So I wanted to talk about guys that I think everybody should be watching in training camp this year. And I think number one should be their first-round pick at 15 overall from 2022, and that is left guard Kenyon Green.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of eyes are on Kenyon Green. He missed all of last season with injury. He struggled through playing through injury his rookie season.
Yeah.
How important is this camp for Kenyon Green?
Oh man, Pat, it's huge. Well, let me say this. I'm so excited it's real football season. Like I can't believe it's here. The Texans being the first team going to training camp too. It's just no longer we have to wait. First team getting after it. Hall of Fame game coming in a couple of weeks. Like it's going to be a lot of fun. But to your point, to your question, this is huge for Kenyon Green. Number one, can you stay healthy? You mentioned rookie year banged up, last year banged up. Really hasn't had a full offseason. This is kind of his first full offseason as a professional. So this is going to be huge. This is going to be huge. He came in at 15th overall pick. He was supposed to be dynamite. He was supposed to be the physical, the mauler, the nastiest guy, and we haven't seen it consistently yet. So this is going to be huge for him, fighting for a spot to get on that starting five offensive line.
Not only that, but you think about if Kenyon, for Kenyon Green to perform well, the impact that has on the offensive line as a whole and what it does for an offense that could potentially be explosive and dynamic.
Yeah.
And if he is unable to play well, the shuffling that now has to go on the offensive line to try to figure that out. And, can they? Last year, running the ball was a big problem for them, and a lot of that was up front. They did not get a consistent push. For Kenyon Green, this is not just what he does for him as it relates to the team, because there's a lot as it relates to the team, but as it relates for him, right? Is he going to be a guy who's going to be able to show, hey, look, you know what? Yeah, I was injured early on, but now let me show you who I am.
Yeah.
Or is he going to wear that bust label? Fair or not, he didn't play last year because he was injured, and a lot of people have already labeled him as a bust. I think it's unfair to label a guy as a bust if he was injured and unable to play, but when you're taking that high, the expectations are also that high.
Expectations are high.
So I think this is a very important camp for Kenyon Green. I do think that if he doesn't show out this year, there's a possibility he's not on the team next year.
Ooh, you think so? You think so? You think
It'd
that's
be
in the
3 years.
category?
I think if after 3 years, if he has not been healthy for 3 years, or 2 years of not really being healthy and 1 year of not performing
Yeah,
well, I
yeah,
think they'd move on. They'll replace him with another guy in the draft next year. They might
yeah.
sign another veteran. I think it's very possible he could be out the door.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
John Metchie, another guy that I think very important camp for him. And look, he's a guy who's really kind of been dealt a bad hand, right? He tears his ACL his last college game, so you knew when you drafted him he was going to have to recover from knee surgery. Then he's diagnosed with leukemia, and he misses his entire rookie year battling cancer. All of last off season, he was still kind of getting through the end stages of his treatment and recovery. And he missed a lot of the offseason last year. He really didn't get a lot of workout. This is his first year with a real offseason.
Yeah.
It's also his third season. And he hasn't had a lot of opportunity because of injury, because of cancer. He didn't show a whole lot last year, but now he's a full year removed. How important is this camp for John Metchie?
This is tough. I think he's fighting for, and this is one of the position groups I feel like is going to be hard to dwindle down. Like, who do you want to keep? It's a good 5, 6, 7 guys, a few draft picks in there from previous years that you can see some upside in. And I think this is going to be one of the hardest position groups to cut down. And your top three is already solidified. You got Nico, you got Stephon Diggs, and you got Tank. And I think that's the order of the three as well. So it's going to be difficult for him to make this team. He needs to have a exceptional training camp. I think it's a perfect opportunity for him to learn from a Stephon Diggs, learn from a Nico Collins who had success last year. But he is a guy that's battling for that fourth and that fifth spot. Like, he needs to have a legitimate camp, a legitimate preseason games, playing well, continue to get that time. And he's to catch the ball consistently. I think the few times that we've seen him last year in live action, too many completions. And when you're in that position, you need to make plays. You need to make the most of your opportunities when they come. So this is going to be a huge training camp for him to really make this team.
So far, he has the endorsement of his quarterback. So far, which is important. You want to have the endorsement of CJ Stroud. But yeah, this is because they are as deep as they are at wide receiver.
Yeah.
At least for this year, right? With Stephon Diggs being a part of it this year, there's some legitimate question of, are you going to be able to show enough to stay on this team? I think he will, but there is a question because, there is still, after your big three, there is Noah Brown. There is Xavier Hutchinson.
Yep.
There is Steve Sims.
Yep.
There is now Ben Skoranek.
Yep.
I don't think any of us think Robert Woods is going to make the team because there's $5 million incentive for them to release him.
Mm-hmm.
But stranger things have happened.
Correct.
And he's a well-respected veteran receiver. So I do think that while it'd be unlikely, it's possible. These are all guys he's got to battle. And I mean, look, this is a kid who was like just tremendous at Alabama. So it's there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's a big camp for him. I think it's a big camp for Dameon Pierce. I think it's a big camp for Dameon Pierce. He was terrific as a rookie. Tough runner, breaking tackles, looked like the real deal. There was a lot of expectations for him last year. He missed a lot of the offseason because he was recovering from surgery, and he never really grasped the offense. And then he got hurt again.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, there's things in the offense that I still have to learn. And number one of those things I can't fix during the season. He needed to learn the offense. He needed to be more comfortable in the offense. Now he has a full off season in this offense. Is this make or break for Dameon Pierce?
It is. Number one, because he plays running back. Number two, because they got Joe Mixon, right? And even though Joe Mixon is nearing the 30-year-old mark, he's still more than capable. I know, right? He's still more than capable of being productive, right? And the biggest thing for Dameon is, can he be a patient runner? Can he fit in this zone scheme? Everything is not downhill. I'm coming hard as I can, punch you in the mouth. There's situations for that. But in this type of scheme, you have to be patient. So it's going to be interesting. Can he be patient throughout this? I mean, it's been OTAs, it's been mandatory camp. Now it's training camp. Can he learn to read the holes, know where the holes are, be patient, and then attack? It's going to be interesting to see if he can do that. Because That's going to depend, like him getting better at that is going to be everything for his playing time. Because if not, they'll keep Joe Mixon in. If not, they'll find somebody else to do it, right? It's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting because I see him as a number 2 back right now behind Joe. But if he can improve in those areas, I wouldn't be surprised if he's not here this offseason.
And, from that point of view, right, he has to show he is going to be able to be the number 2 running back. I think that they are showing a lot of confidence in Dameon Pierce after last season to look at him and say, hey, you're going to be the number 2 back. And I feel like if they don't feel comfortable that he is ready to be that guy at the start of the season, they could make a move to pick up a running back after all the final cuts at the end of training camp when there is just going to be a smorgasbord of players hit the market all at once. They could be looking for a running back, and Dameon Pierce could find himself on the trade block or on the waiver wire. So, and look, it's not a matter of talent. We know he has talent.
For sure.
I mean, he didn't bust off that kickoff return because he's slow or because he doesn't have field vision or because, he's just not good at finding holes or anything. This is very much, he is not comfortable, was not last year, comfortable in this offense. And he has to show he has a firm grasp of the offense and what his role is and where the play is going to go. Otherwise, I think he might be on another team this year.
Mm-hmm.
Number 4, I think, is Jaylen Pitre. Another guy who had a tremendous rookie season, struggled a lot last year. At one point was benched last year.
Mm-hmm.
This is a guy who was one of their absolute best players on defense his rookie season, had over 140 tackles, and last year seemed to be struggling in knowing what his role was, struggling in knowing his responsibilities in a new defense. I think this is because this is a guy they're counting on to start.
Yes.
And I think this is a very important year for Jaylen Pitre. This is, hey, you need to be able to show that you can do this, or, hey, you know what? We got this guy named Kalen Bullock. We just took him, and he's going to get reps.
The pressure is on, Pat, and you hear nothing but great things about Bullock. How he's a competitor, how he sees the field well, how he's long, how he's lanky, how he can survey the field and attack the ball. This is huge for Pitre because, like you mentioned, his rookie year was outstanding. We were all like, yes, we found our next safety for years to come. And then last year was inconsistencies in tackling, the inconsistencies in being in the right spot, inconsistencies in being in the right place for coverages. This seemed a little confused at times, and I think he got in his own head, and he was like very up and down throughout the year, like you said, eventually getting benched. So this is going to be huge for him. He needs to be a leader. He needs to continue to stand out in that leadership role. He needs to be confident in his role, and let's go out there and make plays. I expect Pitre to have a big year this year. I honestly do. And I think Bullock will be a test to that as far as bringing in competition. When you bring any other competition, normally that the cream rises to the crop. And I truly feel like Pitre is part of that cream, and he'll be able to be some good things for us in the secondary this year.
No, listen, Pitre, I think it's a really big year for him. We know he has the ability because we've seen it before. I think that there's going to be a little bit maybe different role change for him. I think he might get to do play a little more center field. And I think he also might get to play, when they go into dime, he's a guy that I think they could line up as like that dime linebacker. And I think he's going to have they're going to have some opportunities to put him in better places for success based on what they know he is. So I hope they're going to be able to better utilize his talent, and that he's going to be able to better utilize his talent. The last one that I have is really a combo package.
Okay.
And it is the cornerback position on the other side of Derek Stingley Jr., where Jeff Okudah, a former number 3 overall pick, and CJ Henderson, a former number 9 overall pick. A couple of guys who came out of college with a lot of hype, and they have now both gone through multiple teams. As young players, they've both gone through multiple teams, and both of these guys going to battle for a starting role. And I feel like for both of them, this is a huge camp because having been through multiple teams already each, I feel like this is, hey, if you can't cut it here under a prominent defensive-minded head coach who, I mean, like if you can't play defense for D'Amico Ryans, maybe you can't play defense in the NFL.
Mm.
I'm like, these guys, if they do not have a big camp and then have a strong showing in the regular season, they might be playing in the NFL next year. They might be playing in the UFL next year.
This is two, if I'm not mistaken, former top 10 picks in the same draft class. I think in 2021, 2020, right? Highly touted coming out of high school, highly touted coming out of college, have not lived up to the expectations. And when you are a former first round pick, you get every opportunity to prove that you cannot play. Well, this is obviously their third teams, I think, apiece. They bounced around a little bit. This may be their last straw to be a serious candidate to be a starter in the NFL. This may be their last straw to be a serious candidate to make the roster in the NFL. When that comes to play, there is nothing bigger. There is no training camp bigger. This is their Super Bowl. They got to prove that they can be on that field. Both of them. They need to prove whether that's being a opposite of Derek Stingley, whether that's being in the nickel position playing inside, whether that's helping in some type of way. They have to prove that they are an asset to the team. Like you mentioned, D'Amico is as one of the best well-known defensive coaches in the league right now. And they've seen the improvement that they had from Derek Stingley from year two to year, or from year one to year two. This in the half of the season we saw last year, like, him and D'Amico got to figure it out. They're doing well. If they can't figure it out here, I'm not sure they'll be able to figure out anywhere else. This may be the last straw. It's only so many chances you get. And I tell you what, when they draft a guy in the second round out of Georgia, Kamari Lassiter, who's been making plays against Stephon Diggs in the offseason, who shows tons of talent, tons of confidence, it's going to be hard to win that opposite job. But this is a huge training camp for both of those guys.
So if you can't make it on the Houston Texans, you might be making it on the Houston Roughnecks. That might be happening. It is the league of second chances.
Yes,
and look, I think it's great that we have a league of second chances, to be honest with you, because I think there's a lot of guys, a lot of young guys who don't get enough reps to develop, to be able to become NFL players. They don't get enough reps to impress coaches because they're buried down the depth chart because they were late round picks or undrafted rookie free agents or whatnot, and they didn't get enough opportunity because, well, maybe they were veteran free agents, they were veteran players, they were higher draft picks. The team wanted to look at more. So I think it's great that there is an opportunity for these guys to get film, to get reps, to grow. But yeah, when you are a former top 10 draft pick, or in Akuda's case, top 5 draft pick, and you're on your third team in 6 years, if you fail on team 3, you're going to be playing in the UFL.
Yep.
Now, as we're getting through training camp, talking with former Houston Texans wide receiver, 6-year NFL veteran Cecil Shorts III, things that you might be watching for specifically in training camp. Are there any specific position battles? How a new player adapts, how a new draftee adapts. I'll tell you, there's a couple of rookies that I think have kind of flown under the radar since the draft. And I got my eye on some of these guys because, look, one thing we know, injuries happen in the NFL. And if you're next, you're next.
Yep. That's absolutely true. For me to hop on the question, a guy I'm looking for, I'm not sure if it's a position battle, but when you draft a guy like Blake Fisher, who plays tackle and played tackle very well, and he was opposite of a guy that went top 5 to the Chargers and Joe Alt, and has some big time talents and big time potential there. When you draft him that high, and then you say, hey, he's coming here to compete, my eyes are on the offensive line, the tackle position. Larry Tunsil, I'm sure he's fine, right? But I think everybody else, as far as competing and be open to business, Titus Howard is open for business. Maybe they move him to guard. Who knows, right? You mentioned injuries. Maybe they move Blake Fisher to guard. Who knows what's going on there? Look at Juice Shrugs and all those guys there. I just want to see the best 5 compete. I want to see the best 5 out there. I want to see the best 5 who has the most cohesiveness between those guys, right? And when you bring Blake Fisher in the mix, I have to watch the offensive line. I have to see what he looks like at tackle. You mentioned it. Maybe he's a swing tackle. Maybe he's a guy because the last couple of years, Tunsil's been banged up a little bit. Titus Howard's been banged up a little bit. You have to protect your asset in CJ Stroud, right? What can he bring to the table? Can he be consistent there? Can you move him down to a guard? Is he too big to be a guard? Can he move? Can he do well in the zone scheme in the run game? My eyes are on Blake Fisher a lot this training camp to see what comes with his talent and what comes with that position group.
You need to get out of my head, Cecil. You need to get out of my head. Because Blake Fisher is a guy that, really since the draft, we went through all of mini camp, all of mandatories, and I don't think I heard his name once. He has flown totally under the radar. Obviously there's been attention to Kamari Lassiter. There's been attention to Cade Stover. There has been very little attention paid to Blake Fisher. And considering the injury histories of Titus Howard, look, when Titus Howard plays, he's a really good right tackle, but he does get hurt. Laramie Tunsil played most of last year on one leg and then had off-season surgery and is probably going to take it easy to start camp. They took Blake Fisher as a guy who, is when you draft him that high, second round pick, that's a guy that you expect, hey, this guy, if we need him, can be a starter.
Yeah.
And for a team that burned through offensive linemen last year, there is a very good possibility that Blake Fisher is probably going to get a decent amount of reps during the season this year because guys get hurt. And you have to have depth on your bench of guys who can come in and actually play. Yeah. They don't have George Fant this year. So, you need somebody who can actually play. Well, they spent a high draft pick on an offensive tackle out of Notre Dame. You mentioned, played opposite Joel. And there is this, kind of expect, hey, this guy should be able to play as a rookie and perform. And nothing has been said about him all offseason. So, yeah, he is definitely somebody. 6'6", 310 pounds. I caught what you said. He might be too big to be a guard. I think you're right. He might be too big to be a guard.
I don't know.
I don't know how many 6'6" guards there are in the league. Yeah. But, at the same time, this is a guy who's, had a really strong college career. And, you expect, hey, this year he could help some. And, going a year or two down the road, this guy might be starting.
Yeah, could be.
For me, one of the guys that I'm looking for, to see what he does is JR Jordan. Another rookie that has kind of flown under the radar. He's a 6th-round pick, but was a very productive running back at Louisville. And because of the questions after Joe Mixon at the running back position, with Dameon Pierce, it's okay. You've had a full year in the offseason to learn this offense. Can he pick it up? Daria Gumbawale. Look, I think one of the best uses for him this year could literally be as a kickoff specialist. So that you could have that extra tackler on the field. It's like, hey, all you got to do is drop it in between the 20 and the goal line. You don't have to kick it out of bounds. You don't have to kick it out of the end zone. Just drop it right in this bucket. You don't have to try to boot it out of the building. And then he gets to charge down the field, which gives them, an advantage if, hey, you can have an extra tackler as opposed to a kicker.
Yeah.
And I do think that is, I really hope that is something they at least experiment with. And I think Daria's a very good in pass protection, picking up the blockers in the backfield. I think he's a good receiver out of the backfield. I'm not sold on him as an actual runner of the football. Yeah. Definitely not between the tackles.
Yeah.
So I think that because there's not a lot of anything proven and certaintied sort of behind Joe Mixon, that if JR Jordan can have an impressive camp showing, he can carve himself a role. I think that it would be if he's able to show that, hey, he understands the offense and he shows you the burst and he shows you the athleticism. I think it's possible he can move up the depth chart pretty quickly.
That's interesting. I'm not sold on Jawar. That'd be something to watch. I'm not sold on Jawar yet. I need to see more. I think it's a solid 1-2 with Joe and Dameon. If Dameon, like we talked, can prove that he knows the system and can improve. And then you got Jawar and Dare behind those two. So it'll be interesting to watch them. I think one of the groups, and we mentioned already, is the receiver room. You got your big three, but after the big three, who are you going to keep? Is it going to be Noah Brown, Metchie? Are you only going to keep 5, right? Are you going to keep 6 and add Hutchinson in there? Robert Woods, maybe he'll get released or traded or whatever the case may be. Who knows? Maybe he stays along because he's just a solid veteran receiver, knows where to be at the right spots at the right time. And then you got these 2 twins that came in and undrafted free agency that's supposed to make some noise too. So I'm interested to see that wide receiver room and how it shakes out. Like you said, injuries happen. Nico was banged up the last couple of years. Last year was the most healthy year, right? Had an awesome year last year. Tank had some issues in the offseason and then got banged up blocking somewhere he should not have been blocking, right?
That's why Ben Skoranek is here.
That's why Ben. Oh, I didn't even mention Ben. And Ben
Dude's like a tight end.
Ben played tons of positions. He lined up at fullback, at tight end, at slot receiver with McVay out with the Rams. So it's going to be interesting to see if it's 5 receivers, if it's 6 receivers, and what 6 do they keep? Because Ben's a bigger guy. Aiden Hutchinson's a bigger guy. Metchie's not that big. He's more of I guess a stature of a Stephon Diggs, maybe a little bit taller, but a speed guy, route runner. So I'm interested to see, what guy would be a special teamer, what guy can be like the utility belt, like Ben usually was in St. Louis. I'm sorry, St. Louis. I just aged myself in LA. In LA. So that receiver room is really interesting. I'm curious to see who lands on that final roster. Probably 6 guys that stay.
I think Skoranek is really interesting because was he like 6'3" and 230 plus pounds?
Big dude. Big dude.
He almost looks more like an H-back than he does a wide receiver.
Mm-hmm.
And because you mentioned has the guy who's lined up as a running back. They lined him up at tight end. They line him up at wide receiver because he's so versatile. And because this is a guy who, like at his size, he can get down there and he can throw some blocks.
Yep.
I wonder if because of the versatility that he offers, the team looks at him and says, you know what, you could almost be, a backup tight end sometimes. You could be an H-back. We could line you up at fullback, 230 pounds. You're a fullback. I wonder if they look at him as we can line you up in all these different ways and all these different positions that they keep him, even if they don't keep him, quote, as a wide receiver. Do they keep him as a tight end? Do they keep him as, just somebody who's like a jack of all trades where he's a running back and a tight end and a wide receiver? Mm-hmm. And I think that because of that versatility that you mentioned, there's a chance he makes this team, but kind of in an unorthodox style where he doesn't have a set position. Mm-hmm. He is a guy who's kind of a backup at multiple positions.
Yeah. Yep. I can see that. And I tell you, one coach is going to love him is Frank Ross. Frank Ross is going to fight to keep Ben on that roster because not only can he do multiple things on the offense side of the ball, he can run down on kickoff. He can be a gunner on the punt team. Like he can do so many things. It's going to be hard to keep him off this roster.
Hey, listen, 230-pound dudes as gunners. Yeah, you want those guys on your special teams unit.
Absolutely.
Give me that guy on my special teams unit. This is the Believe in Texans podcast. He is 6-year NFL veteran, former Houston Texans wide receiver, Cecil Shorts III. I am Patrick Creighton, host of Area 45 on Sports Radio 610, your home of the Houston Texans. And Cecil, there was a piece in The Athletic recently from Larry Holder talking about how the Texans may have added 2 of the most important veteran pieces in the offseason this year. Okay. And he says, I'm not talking about Stephon Diggs, and I'm not talking about Joe Mixon. He says he's talking about defense, and he's talking about pass rushers.
Mm.
And he goes into pressure percentage and sacks and splash plays. And he is focused specifically on Danielle Hunter and Danico Autry.
Mm.
Your thoughts on, are those the two most important offseason additions for the Houston Texans?
Um, I think it's up there. I think it's up there. I think in today's football, you want to be able to rush the passer and protect your passer, right? You used to be able to run the ball and stop the run. That used to be the old school mindset. You need to run the ball, you need to stop the run, and that's still the case somewhat. But in today's game, with all the quarterbacks, with all the unique guys that can get out the pocket and creating space and make incredible throws, you need guys to rush the passer. You need guys to be disruptors, right? And when you look at the Texans defense and their strength is up front, probably in the front seven, right? And the back end is where the struggle, if you had to consider like a area will need to improve, would be the back end, right? That's why you brought in the two former top 10 picks. That's why you drafted a guy in the second round. Would have helped those guys in the back end if you have an extreme pass rush, if you have an exceptional pass rush, that's going to help everything on defense. So I think a guy that doesn't, Danielle Hunter, obviously, what, 16 sacks last year, whatever it was, incredible year. One of the guys, top pass rushers in the league since he's been here. But Danico Autry, who at first I'm like, okay, he's a good player, but his age worries me a little bit. He hasn't showed any signs of his age. He hasn't showed any signs of him slowing down or looking apart. He is a guy that's going to rush the passer from the inside. He can move around. And when you have a veteran like Danico, when you have a veteran like Daniil, and then you drafted a guy number 3 overall who just won Defensive Rookie of the Year, they're going to give him all the tools. They're going to teach him how to beat double teams, how to be great on your stunts, how to be a professional. He's already a hard worker. Will Anderson's already known for working extremely hard and being the first one there and the last one to leave and one of the most motivated guys in the locker room. So when you bring veterans like that to play, it's going to be crazy. So I do agree. I do agree. Those two guys were some of the biggest offseason moves. I think Stephon Diggs is up there as well. I think Joe Mix is up there as well. But I'm not surprised of his take. Like when you bring in two guys that have solidified themselves as great professionals, great pros, and great at what they do, and then you got a guy that can potentially be great as well, that's scary for any offense, and it's awesome for D'Amico on that defensive line and that secondary as well.
I agree with everything you just said as far as how important these two guys are. But I want to put us in the Wayback Machine. And by the Wayback Machine, I just mean earlier in the offseason. When free agency first opened and the Texans had a ton of money and they're coming off a very surprising season and they did not run out and just drunken sailor on shore leave buy every star they could. In fact, Danico Autry was one of the first players they signed.
Mm.
And a lot of people in the local media and a lot of fans, they were angry. They were losing their minds. Why haven't they spent money? Why aren't they getting this star, this guy? Man, Nick Caserio's an idiot. What is this guy doing? I don't trust him. He's going to ruin everything. Fast forward a few months later, and obviously all that has changed. But when Danico was first signed, most people did not look at him as the impact signing that we believe he is going to be, because he wasn't a big, sexy name. He wasn't, one of the, quote, the jewels of the free agent class. It's just a guy who, as he gets older, continues to get better, stays healthy, comes with a double-digit sack here, where he played inside, played outside, and he was probably more effective inside than he was outside.
Yep.
And, for a team that changed over 3/4 of its defensive line and got rid of both of its starting defensive tackles, you now add a defensive tackle that has pass rush ability, who can push the pocket forward, who can get after the quarterback from the defensive interior. And that all seemed to be very lost on a lot of media and a lot of fans early in the offseason. When they acquired Danielle Hunter, then it was This is the greatest move ever. Nick is amazing. I love Nick Caserio. He's a genius. All hail the sweater vest. And
yeah.
it's funny to me how you just, the name brand recognition
Name brand's big in free
is
agency.
where everybody's looking.
Yeah.
Whereas, what do we know about Caserio? Caserio excels in the margins.
Yeah.
He is the best at, being able to understand a guy's true abilities, how it fits into their system, how they can utilize that guy. And he is phenomenal at that. I mean, you look, not just the offseason. I mean, look, they've had 2 terrific off seasons, but you look at what he does during the season in, pulling guys out of nowhere, guys who have been released, guys who, we call them, they're in the bargain bin because they've been waived, they've been released, they're no longer on a team, and he is able to pluck these guys off the street, and they come here and they produce.
Yeah.
Because they're the right fit for what the Texans are doing.
Yeah.
He goes out and pulls a DeAndre Houston Carter out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
And you saw him. They had let go of Des King at the end of training camp last year. They bring him back. He comes back his first game. He has 1 snap, and he probably makes the biggest play of the game on the goal line. So they have found guys who have been productive players for them, especially in the defensive secondary where they were beat to hell last year. And this is what he excels at. So to me, while getting Danielle Hunter, that's a great move. He's a terrific pass rusher. Getting a guy like Danico Autry, who people maybe did not look at as, hey, this guy's going to be better as a defensive tackle. This is a guy that we can line up as defensive tackle and then every now and then rotate him outside.
Yeah.
Because, maybe there'll be times we'll set up an overload front and we can have Autry and Hunter or Autry and Will Anderson on the same side.
Yeah.
And have 2 guys who just kind of plug up the middle. Maybe you have like Foley Fadakasi and Tim Settle in the middle, and then you've got 3 pass rushers, 2 on one side, 1 on the other, and you bring an overload and you make them adapt to that. That his flexibility and his versatility allow you to do that. That Danico was a tremendous signing.
No, absolutely. And I think people forget too, when you look at Danico, you played against him twice a year. So if anybody knows him, it's the organization. They know him well because they had to scheme for him. They had to defend him. They see all the plays he made against them. Same thing with Azeez Al-Shir. Like, you played against him for 2 games a year. So of course, he was with D'Amico and San Fran or whatever, but when the scouting department and the GM and the head coach, when they are the other coaches, they're scouting or they're game planning against Danico, and playing against these guys, they know him best. They know what he can do. So I agree. That was a huge signing, and Nick does a great job finding those mid-tier guys that are kind of under the radar that can do some really good things.
Hey, this guy's a real pain in the ass. How are we going to scheme him? How are we going to block him? Offer him a contract.
Yeah, there you go. Put him on your team.
Makes it real easy, doesn't it?
Yes. I'm tired of him. Bring him over here. Just come with us.
and as great an offseason acquisition as Danico is, I still got to put Stephon Diggs as 1 and 1A with Danielle Hunter. To me, Diggs transforms your offense from terrific to juggernaut. Like, teams are not, you can't cover Diggs, Collins, and Tank Dell and Dalton Schultz. You can't cover those guys.
No, and Joe Mixon. No.
Nico is elite against zone coverage, and Diggs is elite against man coverage. And Tank is just so slippery. If you are 1-on-1 on Tank, you're going to lose. And if you're putting all your attention to those guys, there's going to be a big seam up the middle for Dalton Schultz. And you figure because they've got these 3 starting wide receivers who are as dynamic after the catch as they are, I think they're probably going to see a lot of 2 high safeties. I think they're going to see some bracket coverage, because I think teams are going to do their best to double one receiver and bracket the other. And that's going to leave Tank with a lot of opportunities. That's going to leave Dalton Schultz with a lot of opportunities. It's going to leave Joe Mixon with a lot of opportunities.
Joe Mixon,
and
yes, it is.
if your bracket coverage is slow, or when you're going when they're facing zone coverage and you see Nico going across the middle and the guy who has him on one side of the field and the guy who's supposed to pick him up on the other side, if they are slow, they don't pick him up where they should, he's going to turn that 20-yard pass into 40 yards.
Yeah.
And I do think that other teams are going to find it incredibly difficult to try to cover the Texans' three receivers. And then, all right, what do we do with the tight end?
Yeah.
Too
many weapons.
This offense really, I think they've got the best weapons of any team outside of San Francisco. And I also think that this team has the opportunity to be one of the most dynamic, explosive offenses in the NFL this year. They were really good last year when they could hit chunk plays, and they struggled when they couldn't.
Yeah.
I have no idea how teams are going to stop the Texans from getting chunk plays this year with the weapons that they have.
I'll be honest with you. Everything you just explained, I agree with. Like when you are so focused on doubling and bracketing and trying to stop this passing game, it's going to open up the run game. So now you put two high safeties. Guess what? That's one less guy in the box. That's opening up the run game for Joe and Dameon and whoever else is back there. Like, it's going to be hard, really hard to like scheme and stop this Texans offense. So now if you do put one guy in the box, you do go from two high safeties to one high safety. Now guess what? Basically it's man coverage across the board. CJ's like, okay, I'll pick and choose whoever I want to. And like you mentioned, people don't talk about Schultz enough. People don't talk about Schultz. People do not talk about Dalton. Dalton is a playmaker. So go ahead, focus on Diggs, focus on Nico, focus on Tank. Stop all of them, do that. Well, he's going to use Schultz. Schultz is a liable asset to the offense. He can make plays. It's going to be fun to watch his offense go this year.
Dalton Schultz saved their season last year.
He did.
He ripped the ball right out of a defensive back's hands. Like, this is mine. Just pulled it right down. That literally saved their season last season. And, this year, they went through the second half of last year, obviously without Tank. So it was Nico and it was Dalton Schultz. And now it's going to be Nico and Schultz with Tank and with Diggs and with Joe Mixon. Man. And it almost is like CJ daring the defense to blitz him.
Yeah. Yep.
I absolutely dare you to blitz me because I am going to obliterate you. And you saw how good he is, after years of watching the Texans struggle against the blitz. Every time there was an overload, it was a disaster.
Mm-hmm.
Teams try to blitz at CJ, and he makes them pay.
As answers.
Every time, makes them pay. And it's like if you can't get home with 4 against the Houston Texans, and you're hoping the Texans offensive line as a healthy unit this year will have their bookend tackles where they belong. We'll have Drew Scruggs playing center where he belongs.
Yep.
We'll have hopefully a healthy and ready to go big chip on his shoulder Kenyon Green opposite Shaq Mason. That offensive line, the line that they were expected to have, that line is going to have a lot more integrity than some of the lines that we had to see last year where guys are shuffling all around the line, coming in, coming out, guys playing different positions from week to week. You got different line combo from week to week. As a consistent unit, that teams are not going to be able to get home with 4 fast enough to beat CJ finding the open receiver down the field.
There's no way. There's no way. I'm sorry. I'm getting excited. I'm so pumped up. Football's already back. There is no way you're going to be able to consistently. Okay, go ahead, bring 5, bring 6. As a rookie, he knew where his answers were. As a rookie, he knew how to beat one of the best passers against the blitz. I can't wait till year 2, and they putting things more together. It's just going to be incredible. I can't wait to get started. Preseason game needs to come fast. I know they probably won't play too much, but I just can't wait.
Man, I'll tell you what, if a team's going to bring 6 against CJ, they might as well just say, we are as desperate can be. Because you bring 6 against CJ, you're giving up at least a 40-yard play.
You're in trouble. Explosives
there's
everywhere.
No way you can cover all those guys, and he's going to know who's open.
Explosives everywhere.
he is unbelievable for a guy who is only going into his second year at being able to understand who is going to be open before the ball is snapped. And it's the way he's able to read the defense, understand what's going on, who's going to be where and when. He shouldn't be able to do this right at this point in his career. Where is the learning curve?
Yeah.
Like his learning curve was 2 games.
Yep.
It was the first 2 games of the season. That was his learning curve last year. He is unbelievable. He really is. And just when you think about it, if you're a Texans fan who, suffered for years with either bad quarterback play, mediocre quarterback play, Metchie had a couple of good years, but was never, an elite quarterback. He
Correct.
made the most of what he had. And I think he was a good, solid player. But if we're going to be honest, there's 2 words that every quarterback hates to hear that would just apply to Metchie. And that would be game manager. His job was to manage the game and not turn the ball over, make a couple of key throws, and give the ball to Arian Foster. And he did very good. Like, he was very good at his job.
Couple Pro Bowls. Mm-hmm.
He just wasn't going to get them over the top. Mm-hmm. And, then, with Deshaun Watson, you think you have that quarterback, and it doesn't work out. Now you have C.J. Stroud, and you're like, C.J. Stroud is an upgrade over Deshaun.
Yeah.
From Deshaun's heyday, not from what he's looked like in Cleveland.
Which is crazy to say.
From what he looked like here, in 2017 and 2019, like when Deshaun was at his best.
Yeah.
And you think, you know what? CJ is better. He makes his reads faster. He's more accurate. He doesn't have to rely on the legs as much as Deshaun did. And he's a rookie. He's going to get better. A couple of we'll call these housekeeping items. Guys who do not have designations who were previously injured. So Laramie Tunsil does not have an injury designation. Titus Howard, Noah Brown, MJ Stewart, Tegan Catoriano. None of those guys, so they are considered active and healthy for the start of training camp. Andrew Beck, D'Angelo Ross, Delshon Phillips, they will begin the year on the PUP list. Dylan Horton begins the year on the NFI list, non-football injury list. And, the Texans enter camp overwhelmingly healthy.
Big deal. It's a big deal.
Since we just mentioned him, Tegan Catoriano. That's a guy who has been pretty good when he's on the field, right? He's not especially big, and he's not especially fast. But when he has played, he's made plays, he's made blocks, he's made big catches, but he spent a lot of time injured. Tegan Catoriano, is that another guy that you look at and say, hey, this is a big camp for him because he needs to show he can stay healthy. When he's played, he's been pretty good.
He got to show he can stay healthy. I think Cade Stover is going to be the hot name in camp when it comes to tight end. I think he'll be the guy everybody's watching, the guy that everybody loves. He's from Ohio State, played with CJ. They'll have a little connection there. And I think Ben from I keep wanting to say St. Louis. Ben from the Rams is going to take some time away from, or take somebody's spot potentially. So when it comes to him, he needs to have a good training camp. He needs to step up and make some plays and show that he can be an asset.
I wonder if he is a guy that if he doesn't make the team, they're able to sneak onto the practice squad.
Oh, for sure. For sure. He'll be a guy that the organization loves, the coaches love, they enjoy. And if he can't be a guy that makes the 53, I'm pretty confident he'll be on the practice squad for sure.
And that's another position. Look, they ran through a lot of tight ends last year, too. They ran through a lot of offensive linemen, a lot of tight ends. They ran through a lot of defensive backs. It's like all the injuries were concentrated to 3 spots.
Yeah. Yep.
So, but like I said, the Texans enter training camp mostly healthy. And that is something I think is very important. They went through the offseason mostly healthy. They're going to get into training camp mostly healthy. It's a season where there is a lot of expectations. It's going to be a really fun season for the Houston Texans. If you're a Texans fan and you're not juiced, if you're not amped, have somebody check you. You might be dead.
Check it. Make sure they're good. Whatever you got to do. Make sure they're alive.
Clear. This is the Believe in Texans podcast. Make sure you like and subscribe to the podcast. Get it wherever podcasts are available, wherever you get your podcasts. In fact, there's a little icon down here that tells you all the different places that you can get your Texas Believe in Texas podcast. Appreciate my man Cecil Shorts, 6-year NFL veteran, a former Houston Texans wide receiver. I'm Patrick Creighton, host of Area 45 on SportsRadio 610. You hear us every night from 7 to 11 p.m. on your flagship home of the Houston Texans. Training camp about to get underway. Exciting. We're going to be back on Saturday with another edition of the Believe in Texas podcast. We'll see you then. Go Texans!